Hello. Thank you for considering this story. This is a Taylor Alt Power. I've always had a certain interest in the psychology of others, especially so with the connection between the world of Silent Hill and its victims. I warn you, I'm not going to explain certain things as I intend to leave much to the speculation and the intrigue of the human imagination. It's an unfortunate quirk of mine. That, and also a demotivational streak that will last forever. I also warn you that very little scares me. In most of my horror stories, I like to try to scare or unnerve myself. I wonder where we'll end up with this. You have woken. A jarring weight sags your limbs as you make the effort to move. Your eyes have a tight feeling like tape or glue keeping your eyelids together. With a jolt of willpower, you tear them open. Awareness strikes your being as you have the horrid experience of stuff in your eyes. You rub the sleep out of the corner of your peepers as you sit up. A foreign texture rubbing against your elbow sets in an unease. That isn't your blanket. Looking around, you realize this is not your room. You are Taylor Herbert, and you are in the hospital. Dim lights hum above you through great textured plastic. The roof foam panels are mostly somehow stained, but the one right above your bed is missing a corner, exposing you to a black void beyond the ceiling. It reminds you of your closet when your mother would comfort you when you'd get scared of the darkness. You would say that it was just the monsters or the tetanus-ridden door hinges that remained after you got the door removed. This memory, despite being slight, served only to bring your thoughts back to your mother. The pressure on your head, slight as it was, increased in noticeable proportions. Going to cry for a week straight. Like a thought loop, you are brought back to the present, back to the forefront of your mind and the hum of hospital lights. The reason you're here. Locker. Blood, metal, scraping, crawling inside. You look to your left arm. There's a bandage wrapped around halfway between your shoulder and your elbow. It bulges around the wound, like one of those oven popcorns you would cook in a pan. You look away as you lift your right hand to help, as little as it was needed since you already swallowed, keep your vomit in. Wait. You realize, other than the pulsating pain coming from your bicep, you feel fine. You notice a pile of yellow in the corner. Is that? The door suddenly opens. A nurse enters with a mop and a bucket. She moves to the corner and places the bucket down before looking in your direction. She seems not to notice you. Either that or she looked right through you. Until she looked away. She whipped her head back towards you, her eyebrows raised in surprise. You're awake? She stumbled slightly. I mean, it makes sense. The fingers raised to her chin in pondering. Excuse me, you speak up, your throat uncomfortably smooth. What happened? Panacea healed you. Special circumstances, it seems. You feel discomfort rise in you. But... Your arm? Not what you meant to transition to, but she approaches slowly. Panacea said something about not being able to affect other organisms indirectly. Something seems to surge, activating your thoughts and sending them through your mind like a racetrack. Is this panic? Disgust? Guilt? You feel yourself fading. The world becomes unfocused as the nurse begins to take a look of panic. Before you know it, everything is black. There's a sudden pitter-patter that you notice as soon as you're able to think. You open your eyes, now remembering. You're on the bus to school. Were you just dreaming? You didn't get any sleep last night either, huh? A voice asks from the other side of the bus. You turn to see someone unfamiliar. A black girl with curly hair, high cheekbones, and wearing what your mind's first thought perceives as trashy. You shake yourself slightly. You can't think like that. It's certainly not your place to judge someone like that. Thinking that you're shaking yourself awake, she continues. I'm in the same situation. Got to a friend's house, so I took the opportunity to live life to its fullest. Why was she talking to you? You've seen her at school before? Did she not remember you? What about you? You got any reason? She tilted her head, the universal sign of questioning. Despite her uncomfortable probing, you couldn't help but answer her. Dreams. Restless dreams. You remember nothing. Huh. You'd think that you'd still get some rest, but I see where you're coming from. She adjusted herself, sliding into a leaning back position. I got too many things I can't avoid too. The past and what's happening now. How did you know? Hey, it's Brockton Bay, comes with the territory. Everyone's living their own personalized hell. With a certain dramatic appeal, the doors to the bus open. You've arrived at school. So far, no one's noticed you. The trio aren't outside as they usually are, waiting your arrival. Their hanger-ons aren't watching from the windows and the roof, just distant enough to claim deniability. To be fair, you've been away from school for a few weeks. The girl you had had a conversation with had disappeared as soon as you stepped off the bus, running off to places unknown to you and quite unwanted. The talk was enlightening, but you couldn't help but feel you two were from separate realities. She had friends to run off to. You had enemies to recognize your return. Enemies? Is that what you would call them? The definition surely fits, but it felt wrong, as your mind threw it through various scenarios. There was some sort of apathy that allowed you to even consider this, a weight that pressed into your shoulder-neck bones and drained you of your will to carry forward. Stone tile, grass, and trash lay strewn in front of the school. You stared at the trash as you considered. Emma was never the same after you had returned from summer camp. She had become distant and her words had made no sense to you. You suppose it was your fault that things got this bad? Perhaps you could have considered her wording a bit more carefully. She clearly meant what she said, but you were so elated to see her again and catch up, you had forgotten her words in near entirety. In her future encounters, she repeated some variation of them. You felt hope that blinded you from what she had transformed into. Her side of the story was entirely unknown to you. Now that you consider this, you wondered why you didn't hate her for her actions after that. Any common human mind would grow aggravated and forego common sense when it came to thoughts and interactions towards those who hurt its vessel. Shaking your head, you continue forward, through the doorways into the open halls. Tile. More tile. Dirty plastic floor tiling that the school likely paid cheaply for. In the back of your mind, you register that people are staring at you. You felt this before, back during the days of the first weeks before you felt hopeless. You thought the entire world was out to get you. Curiosity lights their eyes as you stagger onward. Do they recognize you? Did they remember? You knew that your mind was biased, but it didn't stop the sheer amount of dissatisfaction that clouded your thoughts whenever your eyes would pass over one of them. They stood by and did nothing. They were observers, spectators, and entirely neutral towards your situation. That was interesting. Where was the hatred? Why did you not care? The only thing keeping you on that thought was belief. The idea that any sane mind would grow concerned over losing its emotions. Taylor? You heard a voice that, upon turning around, belonged to a familiar redhead. Emma was as pretty perfect as she ever was, every hair manipulated in a way to be appealing. Her face was frozen into a stoic facade, one which was familiar to you and would either turn into a conceited grin or a furious frown. That frown wasn't furious, the one she put on now. Emma's face was like her clothes, suited to the situation no matter how awful and filthy it was. But underneath all that makeup and disguises, she had obvious tells. She was concerned. It was elating, being able to recognize her emotions now after so long. Where did your glasses go? You blink, not realizing you didn't put them on this morning. You felt your eyes just in case, and indeed they were gone. Everything was just as blurry as when you had your glasses off, but you just didn't notice until now. In fact, when you look at Emma, you see her features near perfectly. There is a fair distance between the two of you, 5 feet, but you can relate your sight to being a magnifying glass. She huffs and crosses her arms, her eyes glistening with tears. She blinks, and it's gone. Your last view of Emma is her fleeing, clicking heels rapidly striking the tile as she stalks away. You stare after her a while, confusion whirring your mind. Was guilt clawing at her? Was she concerned for you? Class is different. There is no mocking, no glue, and no attention. Not only handed you a catch-up package that she had prepared. The people don't recognize you. If Emma, a girl who knew you your whole existence, and made it her own personal goal to torment you for some reason, questioned your presence, then they had no chance. Had people really been so shallow? Or had you changed in some physical way that changed your features? Did you get plastic surgery? Had your face been that bad? Hey, Taylor. Greg turned around in his seat. You seem off. His eyebrow was raised with a questioning gesture. So your face hadn't been the cause of this indifference. Rather, your habits had changed. It's fine. I'm just thinking. You casually throw off his worry. If you were to talk to anyone, it'd likely be that girl on the bus. You hadn't seen her since entering the school. Not that it was strange, since it's only the first period. You're likely being too hopeful for anything to happen, though, even if you did see her. Your next class was good old physical education, one of the classes you shared with Sophia. As everyone changed, she stood there by the doorway, waiting. You felt no need to join them in the activity. You were allowed to sit aside due to your previous condition. So you stood there and watched her as she watched you. Once the girls had left the locker room, she began to approach. Emma was right, you really had changed. She wore a sideways smirk, not cocky. You knew cocky. This was a considering smirk, as though she found your behavior interesting. Normally, you would have run away with all of the others. I felt that you wanted to talk to me, alone. Sophia brought interesting emotions to your forethought. As far as you were aware, she deserved no second chance, but then again, why did Emma? Just because you didn't know her for as long didn't mean she wasn't worth saving. Wow, you got ballsy, huh? She crossed her arms, her smirk becoming actually smug. Guess we got through to you somehow. Is that what it was? You took a step forward. She stood in place, but her smirk dropped. Is that what this is? You touch your neck. Something seems to be building up in there, and you're nearly choking on it. Ballsy? Before she could respond, a loud, rhythmic shriek interrupts your line of thought. Sophia's eyes widen as your existence is forgotten. Endbringer. You both start sprinting out of the locker room, arriving into an empty hallway. Despite the panic that seems to worry your thoughts, you note that no one seems to be leaving their classrooms. As Sophia runs far ahead of you, she trips on something before coming to a crashing stop. Her rolling catches blood on the floor as she scrapes her knees and elbow on it. As she recovers, she blinks as she looks around at the classrooms. She locks eyes with you, confusion and terror evident. You try to peer through one of the windows to a classroom before realizing that's somehow been fogged up. A sudden slop of wet something brings your attention to down the hall. The hallway ahead now has a figure wreathed in red dripping bandages. Everything behind them has seemingly had their paint melted and their metal rusted. The ceiling tiles drip down to join the floor tiles as they both seep between the odd cracks in the floor, revealing concrete on both directions of the hall. Sophia, having before observed her injuries, views this occurrence. Her face becomes unknown to you as she turns, before she turns again the other way and grabs your wrist. You are now fleeing. Sophia is keeping you in the untainted halls as you two further retreat to the school. The figure becomes more distant as the distance between you becomes ever so slightly longer. Sophia stops, and your momentum from being dragged causes you to crash into her. There is another, and upon closer unwanted inspection, you can view shards of glass. The entirety of what appears to be an indent of a face is riddled and stabbed with these red-tinted glass splinters. Your hand gripper pulls you into one of the classrooms to the side before she slams the door. The room is suffering from the same transformation as outside. Cracks open in the floor, consuming both the ceiling and floor tiles that have inexplicably turned into a mush substance. The chairs and desks rot and leak some sort of odd brown sap. A slam on the door pulls both of your attention from the appearance of the room. The window has now become splattered with red, which you can only now guess is blood, and chunks of something that slowly dribbled down the window. Before you can fully process what that was, another slam happens, revealing a hand seemingly covered in bandages. The figure from before is outside and wants in. You listen to these slams, frozen in fear as you wait for it to break through. Nothing happens, though, and the creature stalks off. Sophia's breath calms. You find that you were looking at her, because she turns to you apprehensively and takes on a further look of discomfort upon realizing you were staring. This... She takes a deep breath before sighing. This might be a new Endbringer. The siren stops as soon as she finishes saying that. Confirmation or an obvious denial? Or a happenstance luck? All were possibilities.